Arthur Donnelly was 78 years old. He had lived in the same house for 55 years. He knew every creak in the floorboards. He knew which window stuck in July. He knew the sound of the mail truck when it turned onto Maple Street. That Tuesday morning, the mail was different. There was a certified letter. The envelope was thin, white, official. It had a green sticker on the corner. Arthur held it in his kitchen for a long minute. The coffee in his mug had gone cold. He hadn't even taken a sip. He sat down at the kitchen table. The chair across from him was empty. It had been empty for 14 months. Ruth's chair. She always sat there with her crossword puzzle. She always hummed something off-key. Arthur opened the letter. The words were small and sharp. Back taxes. 3 years of them. The county was done waiting. He had 30 days. 30 days to pay or the house would go to auction. He read it twice. The paper felt heavy. Heavier than paper should feel. He looked up at the empty chair. The sunlight came through the window and fell on the seat where no one sat. 55 years of mornings in this kitchen. The time she burned the bacon and they laughed until they cried. The time they sat in silence after David's first phone call from college. The scratches on the table from Ruth's gardening shears. All of it. Every memory. It lived in these walls. And now the walls might not be his anymore. Arthur folded the letter carefully. He placed it on the table. His hands were dry, the knuckles swollen. He pressed his palms flat against the wood and waited for the fear to pass. It didn't pass. It sat down beside him. He was alone. That was the thing that hurt most. If Ruth were here, she would know what to say. She would make the tea. She would tell him to call David. But Ruth wasn't here, and Arthur didn't know how to ask for help. He had never been good at that. The clock on the wall ticked. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a dog barked 2 houses down. The world kept moving, but Arthur sat very still. He sat there until the shadows moved across the floor. Arthur's mornings had a rhythm. He woke at 6. He made 1 cup of coffee, not 2. He used the blue mug, not the yellow one. The yellow one had been Ruth's. He stood at the counter and listened to the silence. There was no radio. Ruth used to turn on the old radio at 7:30. She liked the weather report. She talked back to it. "Rain my foot," she'd say. "I just washed the windows." Arthur poured his coffee. The steam rose. He walked through the living room. The carpet was worn in a path from the kitchen to the sofa. They had danced in this room 5 years ago, their 50th anniversary. Just the 2 of them. Ruth had put on an old Dean Martin record. Arthur had stepped on her foot. She laughed so hard she had to sit down. He could still see the spot where her glass of wine left a ring on the side table. He never cleaned it off. In the kitchen, the toaster sat on the counter. Ruth burned the toast every Sunday. Every single Sunday. She said she liked it that way. Arthur never told her he didn't mind. He would eat any toast she made. He walked down the hallway, their bedroom. Her side of the bed was made. He made it every morning. He didn't know why. Maybe because undoing it felt too final. He picked up the phone in the hallway. He wanted to call David. His finger hovered over the buttons. David was busy. David had his own life, 2 states away. David had a wife and a daughter and a job that kept him traveling. Arthur didn't want to be a burden. That was the word he used in his head. Burden. He hung up before the first ring. Pride, stubbornness. He knew what Ruth would call it. She had a word for everything, but she wasn't here to say it. The house felt large. It felt like a coat that was too heavy. He carried it from room to room and no one helped him take it off. The phone rang on Thursday afternoon. Arthur was in the backyard, pulling weeds he didn't care about, just something to do with his hands. He walked inside slowly. His knees ached. He picked up the phone. "Pop? It's David." David's voice sounded careful, too careful, like he was walking on ice. "How are you?" Arthur looked at the letter on the counter. "Fine, I'm fine." "Good, good." A pause. "Listen, I'm coming up next weekend, Friday night. I'll stay through Sunday." Arthur felt something tighten in his chest. "That so?" "Yeah, I thought I'd help you sort things out." Sort things out. Arthur knew that phrase. It was the same phrase David used when they moved his mother-in-law into assisted living. It was the phrase people used when they thought you couldn't manage anymore. "I don't need sorting," Arthur said. "I know, Pop. I just want to help. Get the house ready. Talk about options." Options. Another word, like sort things out. Arthur gripped the phone. "What options?" A longer pause. "I talked to a real estate agent, just one, in town. She said the market's good right now. If we listed soon..." "We?" "I mean, if you decided to sell, it could take the pressure off. You could move closer to us. There's a nice complex near my office. Ground floor, no stairs." Arthur felt the floor drop. Not literally, but something inside him fell. His son had talked to a real estate agent. His son had planned his future without asking him. His son was treating him like a child who had left his toys out. "I built this house," Arthur said quietly. "I know, Pop. I raised you in this house." "I know, but things change. You can't..." "I'll see you Friday," Arthur said. He hung up, gently. He didn't slam it. He just placed the receiver down like it was made of glass. He stood in the kitchen. The letter was on the counter. The phone was silent. His son was coming to help him pack, to help him leave. Arthur felt discarded. That was the word. Like a newspaper after the news was read. Like a box too worn to hold anything useful. He looked at Ruth's chair. "What do I do now?" he asked. The chair didn't answer. It never did. Arthur decided to pack on Saturday morning. David was coming in 6 days. If his son was going to treat him like a man who was finished, Arthur would at least act like a man who was ready. He stood in the doorway of Ruth's closet. He had not opened it in 3 months. The door stuck. He pulled. The air that came out smelled of lavender. Ruth had hung little sachets from the rod. They were still there, dry and faded. Her dresses hung in a row. The blue one she wore to David's wedding. The green one she liked for Easter. The cardigan with the buttons that were loose. He had meant to fix those buttons. He never did. Arthur stepped inside. The floor was soft under his feet. He touched the sleeve of a blouse. Cotton. Cool. He could almost feel her arm inside it. He couldn't throw anything away. He knew that immediately. He was not ready. He might never be ready, but he had to start somewhere. He looked up. The top shelf held boxes, shoe boxes, hat boxes, a stack of quilts she never used. He reached for a shoebox near the front. It was light. He didn't remember putting anything there. He pulled it down. Dust floated in the air. He sneezed. The box was white cardboard, no label. He shook it gently. Something rattled inside. Not shoes, something smaller. Many small things. His hands trembled. He didn't know why. It was just a box. But it was Ruth's box. It was something she had kept without telling him. He wasn't sure he wanted to know what she had kept secret. He sat on the edge of their bed. The box sat in his lap. He hesitated. The room was quiet. The lavender smell was everywhere. He lifted the lid. Inside the shoebox, there was no pair of shoes. There was a collection. Dozens of small shapes nestled in tissue paper yellowed with age. Arthur picked up the first one. A bird, no bigger than his thumb, wings folded, a tiny beak. He had carved it 30 years ago, maybe more. He had been sitting on the porch. Ruth had said she liked the wrens in the hedges. The next day he gave her this. She had laughed. "It doesn't sing," she said. "But it doesn't fly away either." He set the bird down. He picked up the next. A heart, smooth, worn at the edges where her fingers must have held it. Then a tiny house, a blue roof. He remembered the paint. He had used the leftover from when they painted the bathroom in 1987. Then a church. A steeple so thin he didn't know how it hadn't snapped. Then a dog. Ears floppy. Body low to the ground. Their old beagle, Gus. Gus had died in 1999. Ruth had cried for 2 days. Arthur kept lifting them out. A boat, a flower, a rocking chair, a book, a pair of dancing shoes. Each one was a year. Each one was a conversation. Each one was a morning when he had sat with his pocket knife and a scrap of pine, making something small because he couldn't say something big. He had forgotten most of them. That was the shame of it. To him, they were scraps, whittling to pass the time. But she had kept every single one. She had saved them in a shoebox on a shelf. She had kept his hands with her. Arthur held the tiny house with the blue roof. His eyes burned. He hadn't cried in months. Not since the funeral. He had thought he was finished with tears. But here they were. Because Ruth had kept his love in a box, and he had almost thrown it away with the house. Arthur lifted the last layer of tissue paper. Underneath the dog, under the boat, there was a folded piece of paper. It was thin, soft. It had been folded and unfolded many times. The creases were white with wear. He knew her handwriting before he opened it. The loops were round, the letters slanted left. Ruth had been left-handed. She smeared every word she wrote. He unfolded it carefully. The paper crackled. "If you're reading this," it began, "I'm gone, and you're probably being stubborn about asking for help." Arthur stopped. He read it again. She had written this years ago. She had known. Of course she had known. Ruth knew everything. She knew he would sit in the kitchen with cold coffee. She knew he would hang up on David rather than sound weak. She knew he would wait too long. "You always gave me little pieces of your hands," the letter continued. "A bird when I was lonely. A heart when I was sad. A house when I was worried. You built our life in small pieces, Arthur. Now use them for yourself. Build something that stays." The paper shook in his hands. He couldn't hold it steady. "Stop sitting in the quiet," she wrote. "Go make a mess. Go make noise. Go make something. That's how I found you. That's how I'll keep you." There was no signature. She didn't need one. Arthur sat on the bed for a long time. The letter lay on his knee. The carvings sat in their box. The closet smelled of lavender and old wood. His chest felt tight. Not from sadness, from being seen, from being found, even from somewhere he couldn't reach. "Build something that stays," she had said. He looked at his hands. They were old, the skin spotted, the knuckles thick. But they were still his hands. They had made all these things once. Maybe they could make one more. Arthur knew what he would build. It came to him like a memory, not an idea. At the end of Maple Street, there was a bus stop. There had been a bench there for 20 years. It was rotting now. The boards were gray, the nails rusted. The back slat had fallen off last winter. Ruth used to walk down there almost every morning. Not to catch the bus. The bus didn't even run on their street anymore. She went to sit. She went to chat with Mrs. Chen, with the mail carrier, with any neighbor who passed. She called it her office. She said she was waiting for the bus that never came, but really she was waiting for people. Arthur would rebuild that bench. He would make it strong. He would make it last. He walked out to the shed behind the garage. He had not opened the door in a year. The handle was stiff. He pulled. The hinges squealed. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Sunlight came through the dirty window and made columns in the dark. Cobwebs draped across the sawhorses. His old workbench sat in the center, covered in a tarp that had gone gray. He stepped inside. The smell of sawdust and oil was still there, under the dust. It smelled like living. On the wall, the hooks held his tools: hammer, saw, chisel set. And there, on the last hook, Ruth's old gardening gloves. She used to pot flowers out here while he worked. She would talk. He would listen. The gloves were stiff now. The fingers curled in like they were still holding a trowel. Arthur touched the workbench. The dust was thick. He drew a line in it with his finger. Then he pulled the tarp off. Underneath, a pile of cedar planks, left over from a project he never finished. They were dry. Good wood. He ran his hand along the grain. It was smooth, patient wood. It had waited for him. He picked up the first plank. It was heavier than he remembered. His arms shook, but he carried it to the sawhorses. He was out of breath. He was out of practice. But he was not out of time. Not yet. Building the bench took 4 days. Arthur worked slowly. His hands were stiff. The arthritis lived in his thumbs, in his knuckles. Every grip hurt. Every cut took twice as long as it should have. He talked to Ruth while he worked. Not out loud, mostly. In his head. But sometimes a word slipped through. "Remember our first date?" he said to the empty shed. He was measuring a leg. "I couldn't afford roses, so I carved you one, out of pine. You said it wouldn't wilt. You kept it on your dresser for 40 years. He sawed a board. The saw bit in. The sound was loud. It felt good to make noise. And that summer, with David's boy, little Tommy, I tried to teach him to whittle. He cut his thumb, cried like the dickens. You brought him a Band-Aid and a popsicle. He kept the stick, carved it into a snake the next year, sent me a picture. The legs took shape. They were not even. He measured twice. They still came out slightly off. One was a 1/4 inch shorter. He tried to plane it down. The other leg ended up shorter too. He laughed. It was a tired laugh, but it was real. "Ruth, you'd say this bench has character. You always said that when I made mistakes." He sanded the seat. The cedar dust covered his hands. It got under his nails. It smelled sharp and clean. He sanded until the wood was soft enough for a child's hand, for an old woman's coat. He assembled it with screws, not nails. Nails loosened over time. Ruth had taught him that. "Use screws," she'd said. "They hold." The bench was solid. The legs were uneven, so it rocked slightly on the concrete floor of the shed. But on dirt, on the grass by the bus stop, it would settle. It would sink in and stand still. He loaded it into his wheelbarrow. The walk to the end of Maple Street took 20 minutes. He stopped twice to rest. A car slowed. Someone waved. He didn't see who. He waved back. At the bus stop, he dug out the old, rotted bench. It fell apart in his hands. He set the new one in its place. He stepped back. It was plain. No paint, just cedar. But the grain ran like water. The seat was wide. The back was straight. He sat down. The wood held him. The sun was warm on his face. He had not sat outside in months. Not since Ruth. The air smelled of cut grass and someone grilling lunch 2 blocks away. A sparrow landed on the armrest. It looked at him. He looked back. "She'd like this," he said out loud. The sparrow flew off. Arthur stayed. Mrs. Chen came by on Tuesday morning. She carried a mug of tea in both hands. The mug was chipped on the rim. Arthur had seen it before. It was the one Ruth used to borrow. "I saw you working," Mrs. Chen said. She set the tea on the bench beside him. Steam rose. It was chamomile, Ruth's favorite. "Thank you," Arthur said. Mrs. Chen sat down. She was small. Her hair was white and cut short. She wore a red coat even though it was warming up. "Ruth used to sit here," Mrs. Chen said. "Every morning almost. She talked to everyone. She knew when my grandson was born. She knew when my husband's back went out. She knew everything." Arthur nodded. His throat was tight. "The kids around here," Mrs. Chen said. "They wait for the school bus down the block. It's not safe. No place to sit, No shelter. I told the school board last year. They said budgets. She looked at the bench. She ran her hand along the armrest. You built this for her, she said. It wasn't a question. I built it because of her, Arthur said. Mrs. Chen smiled. The children will use it. The mothers will stand here and talk. The old men will rest their legs. It will be a good place. Arthur hadn't thought of that. He had built it for a ghost. But Mrs. Chen was right. It was for the living, too. He finished his tea. Mrs. Chen went home. Arthur stayed and sanded a rough spot he had missed. When the school bus rumbled past that afternoon, 3 children got off at the corner. They looked at the bench. One sat down. A boy with a backpack too big for him. It's new, the boy said to his friend. Yeah, the friend said. They didn't know who built it. They didn't need to. Arthur watched from his porch 200 yards away. The boy sat for 5 minutes waiting for his mother. Then he ran off. Arthur felt something crack inside him. A small crack, like ice breaking up in spring. It was the first crack in a long winter. Mrs. Chen told the market organizer about the bench. The market organizer told the cafe owner. The cafe owner, a young woman named Paula with tattoos on her arms, came to Arthur's door on Thursday evening. I heard you carve, she said. Arthur blinked. I whittle. It's not the same. Can I see? He didn't want to show her. It felt private. But Ruth's letter was on the kitchen table. He had read it every morning. Build something that stays. He brought out the shoebox. He showed her the bird, the heart, the tiny house, the church, the dog. Paula held the bird in her palm like it was alive. I want to sell these, she said. At the weekend market. I'll give you a table. No charge. People will buy them. I know they will. Arthur shook his head. They're just scraps. They're stories, Paula said. That bird, that dog, they mean something. People need things that mean something. Arthur looked at the carvings. He had made them for Ruth, but Ruth was gone. Maybe they could be for someone else now. Saturday morning, he set up a small folding table at the community market in the church parking lot. He brought 12 carvings. He laid them on a blue cloth he had found in Ruth's drawer. The sun was bright. His hands shook as he arranged them. A young mother stopped. She had a daughter, maybe 5, with braids and a yellow coat. Is this a real bird? The girl asked. It's wood, Arthur said. It's pretty, the girl said. The mother bought it for $8. She handed Arthur the money folded in a receipt. My daughter loves birds, the mother said. Thank you. An old man came next. He picked up the church. He turned it in his hands. His fingers were bent. His eyes were watery. This looks like the church I grew up in, he said. Upstate, burned down in '82. Arthur didn't know what to say. I'm sorry. Don't be. The old man put down $10. I miss that place. This helps. By noon, Arthur had sold 8 pieces. Paula from the cafe came by. She bought nothing. She just watched. I want to commission you, she said. For my shop window, small animals, a fox, a rabbit, a deer. I'll pay you proper, and I'll display the rest on consignment. Arthur sold out by 1 o'clock. He had made $92. It was not enough to save a house, but it was enough to make him feel like a man who made things. More than the money, people had talked to him. They had told him stories about their mothers, about their dogs, about the things they missed. The carvings weren't just wood, they were bridges, little wooden bridges between one lonely person and another. Word moved through the neighborhood the way good news does. Slowly at first, then all at once. Mrs. Chen brought her neighbor. The neighbor brought her sister. The old man from the market brought his grandson. People started stopping by Arthur's shed. They didn't come to buy, not always. They came to watch. Arthur would sit on an old stool, a block of pine in one hand, his pocket knife in the other. The knife was dull. He sharpened it. The sound of the whetstone was familiar. It called people in. A teenager named Marcus asked if Arthur would teach him. "My grandpa used to carve," Marcus said. "He passed before he could show me." Arthur gave him a soft block of basswood. He showed him the basic grip. Thumb on the back of the blade, cut away from the body. Marcus cut himself within 5 minutes. Arthur handed him a rag. "You're fine," he said. "First blood means you're paying attention." Paula cleared a corner of her cafe. She hung a small shelf. Arthur's carving sat there with a card. By Arthur Donnelly, Maple Street. 3 sold the first week. People sat in the cafe and held them while they drank coffee. The garage became a gathering place. On Saturdays, 3 or 4 people would be there. Someone brought donuts. Someone brought a thermos of soup. They talked. Arthur laughed. It surprised him every time. The sound felt rusty, like a hinge that hadn't been used, but it still worked. In the evenings, though, the noise left. The people went home. Arthur walked into his kitchen. The letter from the county was still on the table. He had not paid the taxes. The carving money was something, but it was not enough. Not nearly enough. He sat at the table. The chair across from him was still empty. The joy of the day drained out through his feet. The problem had not gone away. He was just too tired to carry it every minute. He looked at the letter. Then he looked at the shoebox on the counter. He was making bridges, but he couldn't build a bridge wide enough to cross this. The final notice came on a Monday. The envelope was red at the edges. Arthur didn't need to open it to know. 7 days, that was all. He did the math at the kitchen table. He had made $300 in 3 weeks. The taxes were $12,000. The math was simple. It did not work. That night, he went to the shed. Everyone else was gone. The tools were put away. The wood was stacked. He sat on his stool in the dark. He didn't turn on the light. He held the tiny house with the blue roof, Ruth's favorite. She had kept it on her nightstand. When she got sick, she held it sometimes while she slept. "I'm sorry," he said out loud. His voice cracked. "I tried, Ruth. I built the bench. I made the carvings. I let people in. But it's not enough. I'm not enough." The tears came. He didn't fight them. He let them fall on his hands, on the little house. He was so tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. The kind of tired that comes from holding up a wall for too long. "I don't know what to do," he said. "I really don't." He wasn't angry. Anger would have been easier. He was just empty. He had built something. He had tried to stay. But the world was bigger than one old man with a pocket knife. He laid his head on the workbench. The wood was cool against his cheek. The house sat in his palm. He closed his fingers around it. He did not plan to sleep there, but sleep found him. It was a mercy. In the morning, Mrs. Chen found him. She had come to return a bowl. She saw the light on in the shed. She knocked. When he didn't answer, she opened the door. Arthur woke to her hand on his shoulder. The sun was up. His back ached. The carving had left a mark in his palm. "Arthur," she said, "what's wrong?" He looked at her. He was done pretending. He was done being stubborn. Ruth had told him to ask for help. He had waited until he had no choice. He told her everything. The letter, the taxes, the 30 days that became 7, the bench, the carvings, the math that didn't work. He told her he was going to lose the house. He told her he was afraid. Mrs. Chen listened. She didn't say, "Oh, you poor thing." She didn't pat his hand and offer tea. She just listened. Then she took out her phone. "I'll be back," she said. She wasn't gone long. She came back with Paula. Then the market organizer, a man named Gary with a beard and a pickup truck. Then Marcus, the teenager. Then Marcus's parents. Then the old man from the market, the one who bought the church. They stood in Arthur's garage. They looked at the tools. They looked at the carvings. They looked at Arthur, who felt small and old and seen. Mrs. Chen made phone calls. She was fierce. She was efficient. Arthur sat on his stool and held the little house and watched his neighbors become an army. Within 24 hours, they had built a plan. Not a charity, not a handout, a structure. Paula would give Arthur a permanent display in the cafe. No consignment fee, just a shelf with his name. She would promote it. She knew people. Gary, the market organizer, would give Arthur a free booth every Saturday. Prime spot, near the entrance. He would waive the fee for a year. Marcus's father was an accountant. He would help Arthur set up a simple business license, a way to report the income, a way to make it real. Marcus's mother taught at the high school. She would ask the art teacher about bringing students for workshops. Arthur's garage could be a classroom. And a local carpenter, a man named Joe who lived on Elm Street, offered to partner with Arthur on larger pieces. Birdhouses, planters, small tables, things Arthur couldn't lift alone. They would split the profit. "We're not raising money," Mrs. Chen said. She stood in Arthur's kitchen like a general. "We're raising a way for you to earn. A co-op. Arthur Donnelly, master craftsman. You teach, you carve, you build. We help you sell." Arthur looked at them. His garage, his neighbors, his hands. "You don't have to do this," he said. Paula laughed. "You already built us a bench. We're just building you a door." The county office was different with friends. Mrs. Chen drove him there on Tuesday. Paula came too. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They asked for time. They presented a plan, a business, income projections from the accountant, a petition from the neighborhood, 47 signatures. The clerk was young. She read the petition. She looked at the photos of the bench. She looked at Arthur's hands. "I'll speak to my supervisor," she said. They did not get a miracle. They got a payment plan. 12 months, small payments. If he kept them, the auction was off. If he missed one, it started over. But Arthur looked at the paper. He looked at Mrs. Chen. He looked at Paula. "I can do that," he said. David's car pulled into the driveway at 11 on Saturday morning. Arthur saw it from the workshop window. He wiped his hands on his rag. David got out slowly. He was wearing his good coat. He carried a suitcase. He looked at the house, then at the garage. He heard the noise, saw the light on. Arthur stepped outside. "You're early," Arthur said. "I wanted to help pack," David said. He looked confused. "You're not packing." "No," Arthur said. David walked toward the garage. 3 people were inside. Mrs. Chen from next door, Marcus, the teenager, a woman Arthur didn't know last month but knew now. They were sanding blocks of wood. Sawdust hung in the air like gold. "What is this?" David asked. "Thursday workshop," Arthur said. "Free. Come if you want." David turned in a circle. He looked at the house. The lights were on. The curtains were up. No boxes. "The county called," Arthur said. "Payment plan. I keep the house." David blinked. "Dad?" Arthur led him down to the corner. The bench sat there under the morning sun. Oak. Solid. It had a small brass plaque. "In memory of Ruth Donnelly. She liked to watch the world go by." People were already using it. A grocery bag sat on one end. Someone had left a coffee cup on the seat. "I built it," Arthur said. "With the others." David touched the backboard. He ran his thumb along the grain. They walked back to the house. Arthur poured 2 coffees. He went to the closet. He took down the shoebox. He handed David the letter. David read it standing up. He read it twice. His jaw worked. He didn't say a word. He folded it carefully, handed it back. Arthur put the letter in his shirt pocket, patched it. They went out to the garage. Mrs. Chen went home. The others too. It was just the 2 of them. Arthur handed David a piece of sandpaper. He pointed to a rough corner on a little bird. "Like this?" David asked. "Circular," Arthur said. "Gentle." David sanded the bird. He wasn't good at it, but he tried. The dust settled on his sleeves. They didn't talk much. The silence was different now. It had weight, but it didn't hurt. When the bird was smooth, David set it down. "I'll come back next weekend," he said. Arthur nodded. "We start there." "Yeah," David said. "We start." A month later, the leaves were turning. The house was quiet, in a good way. Arthur had made 3 payments. Not easy, but possible. He walked down to the corner in the morning. The bench was there. It had held up. The wood had gone silver in the sun. Someone had scratched initials in the back, small and neat. J and T. He didn't mind. That meant it mattered. He sat down. The bus shelter glass was fogged, but he saw the drawing. Crayon on white paper, taped with yellow tape. A little girl had done it, maybe. Or a boy. A man sat on a bench. Beside him in the sky, a woman with yellow hair and a blue dress. She had wings, or maybe they were clouds. The sun was orange, the sky was blue. The man was smiling. Arthur looked at it for a long time. His eyes were wet. But he was smiling too. He reached into his pocket. The new carving fit in his palm. A small bench. 2 figures sitting close together. Wood grain smooth from hours of work. He had carved it in the evenings, after the others went home. He had carved it for this moment. He held it up to the light. "See, Ruth," he said quietly, "I built something that stays." The wind moved through the trees. A bird sang somewhere nearby. The crayon drawing fluttered against the glass. Arthur set the carving on the bench beside him. The wood was warm in the sun. He sat still. He watched the sky change color. He was not alone. He had the wood. He had the memory. He had the bench. That was enough.